You ever hear the story of Isaiah Cole, the quiet blacksmith, the man who tried to keep his head down on a Mississippi plantation in 1857? Some folks say he was gentle. Others say the anger in him burned hotter than the forge he worked in. One night, 3 bounty hunters rode in, mean men, paid to make Isaiah disappear. They thought he was weak, just another man they could beat, chain or bury without a sound. But they didn't understand the life he'd lived, or the strength he built with every swing of a hammer. By sunrise, all 3 hunters were dead, and Isaiah's hands, steady, quiet, unshaking, told a story too dark for the owner to ever admit. But that was only the beginning, because once blood hits the ground, secrets rise from the dirt. And the men in power? They don't stop until somebody pays. This is the legend they whisper. He didn't start the violence, but he became the storm they never saw coming. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The sun rose mean that morning. Isaiah Cole had felt it the moment he stepped out of his quarters, a weight in the air that pressed down like an iron ingot fresh from the forge. The Mississippi heat came early in summer, and today it arrived with a vengeance, turning the plantation yard into a furnace before the roosters finished crowing. Isaiah led the mule to the hitching post near the smithy. The animal rolled its eyes and stamped, already miserable. He ran a hand down its foreleg, feeling for heat, checking the joints. The mule had thrown a shoe yesterday, and Garrison had been clear about priorities. Get the mule working. Everything else could wait. Isaiah worked methodically. He always did. Measured movements. No wasted energy. He heated the iron in the forge until it glowed orange, then shaped it on the anvil with practiced strikes. The rhythm settled him. 3 heavy blows. Turn the metal. 3 more. The sound carried across the yard, a steady pulse that marked the hours. By mid-morning, the heat had become something living and cruel. Sweat darkened Isaiah's shirt. He paused to wipe his face, squinting toward the cotton fields where the enslaved workers moved in crooked lines, their bodies bent under the sun's hammer. The overseer, a thick-necked man named Harlan, paced between the rows with his whip coiled at his belt. Isaiah had seen Harlan work before. The man enjoyed it too much. Isaiah returned to the mule's hoof, fitting the shoe, driving the nails home with careful taps. The mule shifted, but held steady. Good animal, smarter than most of the men who rode it. Then the shouting started. Isaiah looked up. Across the yard, near the far edge of the cotton field, Harlan had stopped walking. His voice carried, sharp and ugly, cutting through the heavy air. Isaiah couldn't make out the words, but the tone was familiar. Someone had done something wrong. Someone was about to pay for it. Isaiah set down his hammer and straightened. A small figure stood before Harlan. A child, maybe 9 or 10 years old. Isaiah recognized him after a moment. Josiah, a quiet boy who worked the lighter tasks, hauling water and gathering dropped cotton. The boy's shoulders were hunched, his head down, and at his feet lay a burlap sack, its contents spilled across the dirt. Harlan grabbed Josiah by the arm and shook him hard enough that the boy's feet left the ground. Isaiah's jaw tightened. Other workers had stopped to watch, their faces carefully blank. No one moved to help. No one could. Harlan raised his whip, letting it uncoil. The leather snapped in the air, a warning, and Josiah flinched so violently he nearly fell. "Please!" The boy's voice was small and desperate. "I didn't mean—" The whip came down. Josiah cried out, stumbling backward. Harlan advanced, his face red and twisted. He raised the whip again. The leather whistled through the air, struck the boy's shoulder, wrapped around his thin arm. Josiah screamed. Isaiah took a step forward before he could stop himself. He froze. His hands had curled into fists without his permission. His heart pounded against his ribs like it wanted to break free and do something his mind knew would get him killed. Harlan pulled Josiah upright by the whip, yanking the boy toward him. He raised his arm for another strike, his whole body coiling with effort in the brutal heat. The sun beat down mercilessly. Harlan's face had gone purple, veins standing out on his neck and forehead. The whip hung in the air. Harlan's eyes went wide. His mouth opened. No sound came out. He swayed once, like a tree testing the wind. Then he collapsed. The whip fell from his hand. His body hit the ground with a heavy thud that sent up a small cloud of dust. He didn't move, didn't twitch, just lay there in the dirt, with his eyes staring at nothing. Silence rushed in to fill the space his shouting had left. Josiah stood frozen, still holding his bleeding arm, staring down at the overseer's body. The other workers had stopped moving entirely, transformed into statues by shock and fear. Isaiah felt the moment break like a fever. Someone gasped. A woman made a sound that might have been a prayer or might have been a curse. An old man muttered something about God's judgment. The whispers started small and grew, spreading through the field like fire through dry grass. Lord struck him down, right in the middle of beating that child. God saw what he was doing. Judgment come at last. More people gathered, creeping forward in cautious half-steps. A few of the braver ones knelt beside Harlan's body, checking for breath, for a heartbeat, for any sign of life. They found nothing. The overseer was dead, his face frozen in that final moment of rage, his body already beginning to stiffen under the merciless sun. Isaiah stood at the edge of the crowd, watching. He hadn't moved from his spot near the smithy, hadn't said a word, but he could feel eyes turning toward him, quick glances that lingered too long. One of the field hands, an older man named Samuel, looked directly at Isaiah. Then he looked away fast, like he'd seen something dangerous. The whispers changed. Isaiah was watching, saw him staring right at Harlan, had that look in his eyes. You know the look. Isaiah's stomach went cold. He hadn't done anything, hadn't even spoken, but he knew how this worked. Someone had to be blamed. Dead overseers demanded explanations, and explanations required a target. By noon, Caleb Garrison had arrived from the main house, flanked by two white men Isaiah didn't recognize. Garrison stood over Harlan's body, his face pale despite the heat. He was a thin man, always worried, always calculating costs. He looked at the dead overseer like he was adding up how much the loss would cost him. What happened here? Garrison's voice was tight. The explanations came tumbling out. The dropped cotton, the beating, the collapse, God's will, the devil's work. Heat took him. Heart gave out. Too much sun, too much anger. And where were you? Garrison turned suddenly, his eyes finding Isaiah across the yard. Isaiah met his gaze steadily. Shoeing the mule, sir, like you told me. You see what happened? Saw the overseer fall, sir. That's all. Garrison stared at him for a long moment. His eyes were calculating, suspicious, afraid. Anyone else see Isaiah during this? A few people nodded. Isaiah had been at the smithy. They'd heard his hammer. He'd been working. Hadn't moved until after Harlan fell. But the whispers continued underneath the confirmations, quiet and persistent. Glared at him, something fierce. Had murder in his eyes. Isaiah never liked Harlan. Garrison heard them. Isaiah could see it in the way the plantation owner's jaw worked, the way his hands clenched and unclenched. The man was afraid, and fear made people dangerous. Get back to work, Garrison finally said. All of you. The crowd dispersed slowly. Josiah was led away by an older woman who wrapped his wounds with strips torn from her own dress. Harlan's body was loaded onto a cart. The day continued, brutal and indifferent. Isaiah returned to the smithy as the sun began its descent. He worked late, later than usual, his hands moving through familiar tasks, while his mind turned over the day's events, the way people had looked at him, The way Garrison had studied his face, searching for guilt where there was none. He knew what came next. He'd seen it before. Suspicion would fester. Fear would grow. And frightened men did terrible things to maintain control. The sun finally set, painting the sky blood red. Isaiah sat outside the smithy door with a whetstone and a collection of dull tools. The rhythmic scrape of metal on stone was soothing, almost meditative. Crickets sang in the darkness. Moths circled the lantern hanging above the smithy door. Footsteps approached, soft and hesitant. Isaiah looked up. A young woman emerged from the shadows, Lila, who worked in the main house, cleaning and serving. Her eyes were wide with fear, her hands twisting in her apron. Isaiah. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. He set down the whetstone. "What is it?" Lila glanced over her shoulder, making sure they were alone. When she spoke again, the words came out in a rush, desperate and terrified. "I was serving dinner. Heard them talking. Mr. Garrison and those men who came with him. They're planning something." Her voice cracked. "They said your name. Said they need to take care of you tonight or tomorrow, before things get out of hand." Isaiah felt something cold settle in his chest. "You sure about what you heard?" Lila nodded frantically. "They're bringing people. Men who know how to handle problems quiet-like. Please, Isaiah, you need to—" She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. What could he do? Where could he go? She fled back toward the main house, leaving Isaiah alone with the truth. The danger was immediate. Isaiah didn't sleep. He lay on the thin mattress in his cabin, staring at the ceiling boards while his mind worked through possibilities. Every creak of wood made his muscles tense. Every distant sound could be footsteps approaching. But the night passed without incident, and when dawn broke gray and reluctant through the cracks in the walls, he rose with limbs heavy from exhaustion. The other men in the cabin stirred slowly, groaning as they prepared for another day. Isaiah moved among them silently, splashing water on his face from the communal bucket, pulling on his work shirt. No one spoke to him. A few glanced his way, then quickly looked elsewhere. The walk to the smithy felt different this morning. Guards stood at intervals along the path, more than usual. Their eyes tracked Isaiah's movement with obvious suspicion. He kept his pace steady, his face carefully neutral, but his awareness sharpened to every detail. The position of each guard, the weapons they carried, the way they shifted their weight when he passed. Someone wanted him watched. The smithy door stood open. Isaiah stepped inside and surveyed his workspace with fresh eyes. Every tool was a potential weapon, every shadow a possible hiding place. He lit the forge, watching flames catch and grow, feeling their heat push back the morning chill. The day began. In the main house, Caleb Garrison sat across from three men who looked like violence given human form. Maddox Gray was lean and restless, his fingers constantly moving, tapping the table, adjusting his hat, touching the knife at his belt. His eyes never stayed still, always scanning, always calculating. He smiled too easily, showing teeth that had seen too many fights. Reuben Slate sat with perfect stillness, methodical and cold. His hands were folded on the table, his face expressionless. When he looked at something, he studied it like he was planning how to take it apart. Everything about him suggested careful cruelty. Ezekiel Ward filled his chair completely, massive shoulders straining against his coat. His confidence bordered on arrogance, the kind of man who'd never met someone he couldn't overpower. Scars crossed his knuckles. His neck was thick as a tree trunk. "The slave's name is Isaiah Cole," Garrison said, his voice tight with anxiety. "He's a blacksmith, strong, quiet. People listen to him, and that's dangerous." Maddox leaned back in his chair. "What did he do?" "Nothing I can prove. But yesterday, an overseer dropped dead while disciplining a child. Isaiah was watching. People are whispering that he somehow caused it, that God struck down the overseer Because Isaiah wanted it. Garrison wiped sweat from his forehead, despite the early hour. I can't have my property believing one of their own has that kind of power. You want him gone, Reuben stated flatly. Yes, but it needs to look right. Like he tried to escape, and you caught him. Take him into the woods tonight. Do what needs doing. Bring back the body. Ezekiel cracked his knuckles. Easy work. Don't underestimate him, Garrison warned. Isaiah's not like the others. He's smart. Careful. He'll know something's wrong. Maddox's smile widened. They always do. Makes it more interesting. The three men left through the back entrance, disappearing toward the woods that bordered the plantation. Garrison watched them go, then poured himself whiskey despite the morning hour. His hands shook as he raised the glass. Lila moved through the main house like a ghost, invisible to the men making their plans. She'd learned long ago how to be present without being seen, how to hear everything while appearing to notice nothing. The skill had kept her alive. Today, it might save Isaiah. She waited until afternoon, when the guards changed positions and attention wandered. Then she slipped away from the main house and moved quickly toward the smithy. Isaiah was bent over the anvil, hammer rising and falling in steady rhythm. He looked up when she entered, reading the fear in her face immediately. What did you hear? Lila glanced over her shoulder before speaking. 3 men. Bounty hunters. Mr. Garrison hired them. They're going to kill you tonight and make it look like you tried to run. Her words came fast and desperate. You need to leave. Now. Before dark. Isaiah set down his hammer. Where would I go? Anywhere. The swamp. The river. Just away from here. They'd catch me. You know they would. And then everyone here pays for it. But if you stay... If I stay, I choose my ground. Isaiah's voice was calm, but something hard glinted behind his eyes. Thank you for the warning. Go back before someone notices you're gone. Lila wanted to argue, but she recognized the finality in his tone. She fled, leaving Isaiah alone with his decision. He returned to his work with new purpose. The morning's projects had been routine repairs, hinges, horseshoes, simple tools. Now he selected different materials. A heavy hammerhead that could split bone as easily as it drove nails. Metal hooks sharpened to wicked points under the pretense of creating better equipment for hauling. Tongs reinforced until they could crush as well as grip. Every piece looked innocent. Every piece could kill. Isaiah worked carefully, aware of the guards watching from a distance. He maintained his usual pace, his usual concentration. Nothing to suggest he was preparing for anything other than another day's labor. At midday, a shadow fell across the smithy entrance. Miss Alberta stood there, ancient and bent, carrying a basket of mending. Her eyes were sharp despite her age, seeing everything. She shuffled forward slowly, setting the basket down near Isaiah's workbench. Brought some tools need fixing, she said loudly enough for any listening guards to hear. Isaiah nodded, examining the contents of the basket. Beneath the cloth lay scissors, needles, nothing unusual. But when Miss Alberta leaned close to point out a particular item, her voice dropped to barely a whisper. Keep your hands steady tonight. Their eyes met. In that brief moment, Isaiah understood. She knew. Somehow she knew what was coming. And she was telling him to be ready, to be precise, to be the weapon he'd spent a lifetime learning to control. Miss Alberta straightened, took her basket, and shuffled away, without another word. Isaiah returned to his forge. The afternoon crawled past. Isaiah positioned tools around the smithy with careful deliberation. The heavy hammer near the anvil, the sharpened hooks hanging where they'd be easy to reach in darkness, the reinforced tongs close to the door. Each placement looked natural, part of the day's normal disorder, but Isaiah knew exactly where everything was. The sun began its descent, painting the western sky in shades of amber and rust. Shadows lengthened across the plantation yard. Workers trudged back from the fields, exhausted and silent. Guards changed shifts. Lanterns were lit in the main house. Isaiah banked the forge fire, leaving enough coals to provide dim light without flame. He swept the floor clean, organized the tools one final time, then sat down on a low stool near the back wall. Night fell completely. The plantation settled into uneasy quiet. Distant voices faded. Footsteps ceased. The world reduced itself to cricket songs and the occasional cry of a night bird. Isaiah sat motionless in the darkness of his smithy, breathing slowly, listening. Dogs barked in the distance. The hunters were coming. The embers cast barely enough light to see by. Isaiah stood at the anvil, moving through the motions of work, lifting the hammer, bringing it down against cold metal, creating sound without purpose. The rhythm was familiar, steady, normal. He listened. Footsteps approached from behind the building, careful and deliberate. 3 sets, moving in coordination. They thought they were being quiet. They thought darkness made them invisible. Isaiah's grip tightened on the hammer handle. The door remained open to the night air, a black rectangle against the smithy's dim interior. Isaiah kept his back partially turned, presenting the image they expected. A man, alone, unaware, focused on his work. His shoulders were loose, his breathing calm, every muscle coiled and ready. A shadow crossed the threshold. Maddox entered first, knife drawn, that perpetual smile still fixed on his face. He moved like a snake, all fluid confidence, certain this would be easy. His eyes adjusted to the dim light, finding Isaiah's silhouette at the anvil. "Evening, boy," Maddox said softly. Isaiah's hammer was already swinging. He pivoted with all the power built from years of forge work, bringing the heavy hammerhead up in a vertical arc. The motion was too fast, too sudden. Maddox's smile vanished as 5 pounds of hardened steel caught him beneath the jaw. Bone shattered. The impact lifted Maddox off his feet, his head snapping backward with a wet cracking sound. His knife clattered to the floor. His body followed, collapsing in a loose heap that would never move again. "Maddox!" Reuben's voice cut through the darkness. The second hunter rushed through the doorway, pistol raised and firing blindly into the smithy's interior. The shot went wide. Isaiah had already moved, stepping behind the heavy support beam that held up the roof. The bullet punched through wood, missing flesh by inches. Reuben tried to track his target in the poor light. His methodical nature worked against him now, his careful planning useless in chaos. He took 2 steps forward, trying to find angle. Isaiah's arm whipped out from behind the beam. The sharpened hook spun through the air like it had been born for this purpose. All those hours of precise metalwork, of understanding weight and trajectory and force, they culminated in this single throw. The hook caught Reuben in the throat. He dropped the pistol. His hands flew to his neck, trying to pull the embedded metal free. Blood poured between his fingers, black in the dim light. He made a terrible gurgling sound, stumbling backward, then forward, then sideways. His eyes were wide with disbelief. He'd hunted dozens of people, killed them methodically, carefully. He hit the floor, still choking on his own blood. Isaiah stepped over Maddox's body toward the door. 2 down, 1 left. Ezekiel filled the doorway like a wall of muscle and rage. "You're dead," the massive hunter snarled. They met in the yard outside the smithy. Ezekiel charged with pure brute force, the kind of confidence that came from never losing a physical confrontation. His huge hands reached for Isaiah's throat, intending to crush and break and destroy. Isaiah sidestepped at the last second, but Ezekiel was faster than his size suggested. Thick fingers caught Isaiah's shoulder, yanking him back. They grappled in the dirt, 2 powerful men fighting for survival in near-complete darkness. Ezekiel outweighed Isaiah by 50 pounds. He used it ruthlessly, driving Isaiah backward against the smithy's exterior wall. The impact drove air from Isaiah's lungs. Massive hands found his throat and squeezed. Isaiah's vision started to narrow. His hand scrabbled across the ground, searching desperately. His fingers found the reinforced tongs he'd positioned near the door earlier. Heavy iron, built to withstand forge heat and pressure. Built to crush. He swung them upward with everything he had left. The tongs caught Ezekiel's thick neck. Isaiah locked the handles together and twisted, using leverage instead of pure strength. The metal bit into flesh. Ezekiel's grip on Isaiah's throat loosened as the hunter tried to pry the tongs away. Isaiah held on. They rolled in the dirt, locked together. Ezekiel was stronger, but Isaiah understood tools and pressure, and the anatomy of breaking things. He adjusted his grip, finding the exact position where the tongs compressed the windpipe most effectively. Ezekiel's struggles became more desperate, less coordinated. His massive fists hammered at Isaiah's sides, breaking ribs, but Isaiah didn't let go, couldn't let go. This man had come to kill him, to stage his death, to eliminate him like he was nothing. The hammering slowed. Ezekiel made a terrible rattling sound, his eyes bulging, his face turning purple-black in the darkness. His fingers clawed at Isaiah's arms, tearing skin, drawing blood, but the pressure on his throat never ceased. Finally, the massive body went still. Isaiah held the tongs locked for another full minute, making absolutely certain. Then he released them and fell backward into the dirt, gasping for air, his broken ribs screaming with every breath. 3 bodies, 3 men who'd hunted people for profit, who'd killed with pride, all dead. Isaiah forced himself to stand, despite the pain radiating through his chest. The night wouldn't wait. Patrols would begin their rounds soon. He needed to work fast. He dragged Maddox's body inside first, leaving a dark smear across the smithy floor. Then Reuben's, still leaking blood from the hook in his throat. Finally Ezekiel, whose weight nearly broke Isaiah's injured ribs further. He positioned all 3 near the forge, then searched their pockets. Papers, letters, wanted notices for escaped slaves, a journal detailing previous hunts. Everything that identified them as bounty hunters went into the forge coals. Isaiah worked the bellows until flames caught and consumed the evidence. The bodies he covered with scrap iron, broken horseshoes, damaged tools, bent metal pieces that looked like ordinary smithy refuse. Over that, he positioned heavy coal barrels, creating what appeared to be normal storage. Blood covered everything. Isaiah fetched water and ashes, scrubbing the floor on his hands and knees. His broken ribs made every movement agony, but he worked methodically, removing every trace. The blood soaked into the dirt floor, but ashes and water helped obscure the stains. He spread fresh dirt over the worst areas. The yard outside required the same treatment. More water, more ashes, enough to hide what had happened here. Dawn approached. The eastern sky began to lighten from black to dark gray. Isaiah's hands wouldn't stop shaking. Blood seeped from cuts on his arms where Ezekiel's nails had torn flesh. His ribs grated with every breath. Exhaustion pulled at him like weights attached to his limbs. He collapsed onto the low stool near the back wall, unable to stand any longer. His hands were still bleeding. He stared at them in the growing light. Hands that had just killed 3 men. Hands that had crushed a windpipe. Hands that might have damned everyone on this plantation. A sound reached his ears. Subtle, underground, footsteps, coming from beneath the floorboard. Isaiah's hand moved to the hammer still lying beside him. The footsteps grew louder, closer. Something shifted beneath the floorboards near the far wall. A trap door he'd never noticed, camouflaged by dirt and wood grain. The trap door lifted. 3 figures emerged from darkness beneath the smithy. They moved with practiced silence, climbing up through the opening as if they'd done this 1,000 times before. The first was Miss Alberta, her gray hair tied back, her worn dress dusty from underground travel. Behind her came a lean man in his 40s with calculating eyes, followed by an elderly figure whose stooped posture couldn't hide old strength. Isaiah tried to stand. His broken ribs made him gasp. "Stay seated," Miss Alberta said quietly. She moved toward him with surprising speed for her age. "You're hurt worse than you know." "Who?" Isaiah's voice came out rough. "We're the reason you're still breathing." The lean man closed the trapdoor carefully, checking the door to make sure no one approached. "My name is Jonas Reed. This is old Turner." He gestured to the elderly man. "You already know Miss Alberta." Isaiah stared at them. His mind couldn't process what was happening. Underground tunnels, secret entrances, these people appearing from beneath his workplace like ghosts. "How long?" he managed. "The tunnels." Old Turner's voice was gravelly from decades of hard use. 30 years this spring, maybe longer. Built them slow, patient-like. Miss Alberta knelt beside Isaiah, her fingers probing his ribs with gentle precision. He winced. She nodded to herself, confirming something. 3 broken, maybe 4. You'll heal if you don't do anything foolish. Her eyes found his, which brings us to why we're here. "We've been watching you," Jonas said. He positioned himself where he could see both the door and the windows. 5 years now, since you first came to this plantation. We watch everyone, but you were different. Isaiah's head swam. "Different how?" "Quiet," Miss Alberta said. "Controlled, strong, but not reckless. You never started fights, never drew attention. But when that overseer beat young Josiah last year, you stepped between them, took the lash yourself. Didn't fight back, but you didn't break either. We needed to know what kind of man you were," Jonas continued, "whether you'd survive when pressure came, whether you'd run or stand." He glanced toward the scrap iron hiding 3 bodies. "Now we know." The full weight of their words settled over Isaiah like a physical thing. They'd been testing him, watching, waiting to see what he would become. "The bounty hunters," Isaiah said. "You knew they were coming." "We knew Garrison hired men," Jonas confirmed. "Didn't know when they'd strike. Couldn't warn you directly without exposing ourselves. If you'd run, we would have helped you escape north. But you didn't run. I had nowhere to go." "You had the same options everyone has," Miss Alberta corrected gently. "Run, and maybe die in the swamps. Submit, and definitely die in that yard. Or stand and fight." She gestured to his bloodied hands. "You chose to stand." Old Turner moved to the forge, examining Isaiah's cleanup work with an expert eye. "Did good hiding them. But their horses are still at Garrison's stable. Their gear is still in the tack room. Someone will notice by midday." "The patrol captain," Jonas said. "Matthew Yates. He'll tear this place apart looking for answers. The bounty hunters were hired through him. He takes a cut of every kill they make. When they don't report back, he'll know something went wrong." Isaiah's exhaustion made thinking difficult. "So I'm dead anyway." "Not if you're smart." Miss Alberta stood, brushing dirt from her dress. "You have something now you didn't have before. You have us." "What are you?" Isaiah asked. "Some kind of resistance?" "We're people who got tired of waiting to die," Jonas said simply. "We're people who decided that if we're going to suffer anyway, we might as well suffer for something that matters." Old Turner returned from the forge. "We got tunnels under most of the quarters, supply caches, communication lines to other plantations, maps, tools, information." His weathered face showed fierce pride. "We've been building this for decades, waiting for the right time, the right person." "Why me?" Isaiah's voice was barely a whisper. Miss Alberta's expression softened. "Because you survived what was meant to kill you. Because you're stronger than any man on this plantation. But you don't use that strength to hurt the weak. Because people trust you, Isaiah, even when they don't know why." Jonas checked the window again, noting the growing light. We need to move. Patrols start in an hour. But tonight, after dark, we need you to come below. See what we've built. Understand what's possible. And if I refuse, then we disappear back underground, Miss Alberta said. And you face whatever comes alone. But I don't think you will. Why not? Because you didn't kill those men just to survive. Her eyes held his. You killed them because they came here to murder you for profit, because they thought you were nothing, because the system that enslaves us treats us all like animals to be hunted. She moved closer. You felt what I see in your eyes right now. Rage, purpose, the understanding that this can't continue. Isaiah looked at his hands again. She was right. He hadn't fought just to live another day. He'd fought because something inside him had broken when he realized Garrison valued him so little that 3 strangers could kill him without consequence. Tonight, Jonas said, after the evening bell, come to your cabin and wait. We'll come for you. Old Turner was already descending back into the trap door. Jonas followed, moving with practiced efficiency. Miss Alberta paused at the opening, looking back at Isaiah. The patrol captain will question you today, she said. Answer simply. You worked late. You slept in the smithy. You heard nothing. You saw nothing. Keep your face calm, your voice steady. Show them the man they expect to see. And if they don't believe me, they will, she said with quiet confidence. Because you're the blacksmith. Because you're valuable property. Because Matthew Yates needs someone to blame. And you're easier to believe than to destroy. She began climbing down. Until tonight, Isaiah, be ready. The trapdoor closed. Dirt and wood grain aligned perfectly, making the entrance invisible again. Isaiah sat alone in the growing dawn light, surrounded by the smell of ash and blood, and the hidden bodies of 3 dead hunters. Everything had changed. Everything was different now. He had allies. A network, a purpose beyond simple survival. The morning sun broke over the horizon, painting the smithy in shades of red and gold. Outside, footsteps approached. Heavy boots, multiple men. Isaiah stood slowly, ignoring the pain in his ribs, and prepared to face Matthew Yates. The morning sun felt different on Isaiah's skin, hotter, heavier, like the air itself had turned hostile. 2 armed patrolmen flanked him as he walked from his cabin to the smithy. Yesterday, there had been casual surveillance. Today, there was military precision. Men stationed at every corner. Dogs tied near the quarters. A wagon sat in the yard with fresh supplies. Chains, rope, iron collars. Someone important had arrived. Isaiah kept his face blank, his movements steady. He was the blacksmith. Valuable property, a tool that needed maintaining, not destroying. But as he approached the smithy, he saw the stranger. A tall man in a pressed dark coat stood beside Garrison near the main house. Even at this distance, Isaiah could see the authority in his posture, the way other men deferred to him, the silver badge catching sunlight. A marshal, not just any patrol captain, someone from Vicksburg. Someone with real power. Move faster, one of the patrolmen said, shoving Isaiah's shoulder. Isaiah walked faster. His ribs screamed protest. The stranger turned as Isaiah passed. Their eyes met for one brief moment. The marshal's gaze was cold, calculating, the look of a man who enjoyed breaking things. Isaiah looked away first. Submission. Expected behavior. Inside the smithy, the heat from yesterday's coals still lingered. Isaiah began organizing tools, aware of the guards positioned outside. Every movement watched, every sound noted. The morning dragged. Isaiah worked slowly, carefully, making himself useful without drawing attention. He shoed 2 horses, repaired a broken hinge, straightened bent nails. Around midday, screaming erupted from the quarters. Isaiah's hands stilled on the anvil. Through the window, he could see patrolmen dragging men from cabins. The interrogations had begun. A familiar voice cut through the chaos. Deep, authoritative. The Marshal. I want answers about the 3 missing hunters. Someone here knows what happened. Someone here saw something. More screaming. The wet sound of fists hitting flesh. Isaiah forced himself to keep working, forced his breathing to stay steady. By afternoon, the beatings had spread. 6 men lay in the dirt, bloody and broken, for refusing to provide information they didn't have. Garrison watched from his porch, saying nothing. The Marshal was in control now. As the sun began its descent, Miss Alberta appeared at the smithy door. She carried a basket of mending, playing her role perfectly. An elderly seamstress, delivering repaired work clothes. The guards barely glanced at her. She set the basket down near Isaiah's workbench. Her voice was quiet, barely audible over the hammer strikes. The Marshal's name is Silas Creighton. He's built his reputation on crushing resistance. He enjoys this. Isaiah continued working. I see that. He'll question you tomorrow. Personally, he believes someone killed those hunters, and you're his primary suspect. I know. Keep calm, she said. Think strategically. He wants you to break, to confess, to give him permission to make an example of you. Her wrinkled hands sorted through fabric. Don't give him anything. That evening, after the bell rang and darkness settled over the plantation, Isaiah returned to his cabin as instructed. He waited. Minutes stretched like hours. The floor shifted. The hidden entrance opened. Jonas emerged first, followed by 4 younger people Isaiah had never seen before. 2 men, 2 women, all in their 20s. They moved with nervous energy, eyes bright with something between hope and fear. Come, Jonas said. We don't have long. Isaiah descended into the tunnels. The passage was narrow, supported by careful carpentry. Someone had spent years building this, inch by inch, hiding progress beneath normal plantation life. The tunnel opened into a wider chamber. Lantern light revealed a space about 15 feet across, with multiple passages branching off in different directions. Supply crates lined one wall. Maps hung on another. This was a command center. Miss Alberta was already there, seated on a crate. The 4 younger people arranged themselves nearby. Isaiah, Jonas said formally, meet the people who will help us survive what's coming. This is Sam. He gestured to a wiry young man with sharp features. Grady, a broader man with powerful shoulders. Esther, a woman with quick, intelligent eyes. And Marion, the 4th, a woman whose quiet intensity reminded Isaiah of himself. They all watched him with the same expression. Hope. Expectation. Like he was something more than just a blacksmith who'd gotten lucky. Isaiah killed 3 bounty hunters with his bare hands, Sam said, unable to hide his admiration. That true? It's true, Isaiah said quietly. Then you can teach us, Grady said. How to fight. How to defend ourselves. Isaiah shook his head. Fighting won't save you. They have more guns, more men, more everything. Then what will? Esther asked. Miss Alberta answered. Strategy, patience, understanding that the system they built has cracks we can exploit. Jonas spread a collection of papers on a makeshift table. The Marshal, Creighton, he's not just here to find missing hunters. He's here because Garrison called in a favor. Creighton makes money from plantation security. He gets paid every time he solves a problem, like runaway slaves or resistance. He's corrupt, Marion said. Everyone knows it, but no one challenges him. What if someone did? Isaiah said slowly. All eyes turned to him. What if evidence appeared? Isaiah continued, showing Creighton was making illegal deals with rival plantations. Skimming money? Taking bribes? Jonas studied him. You're suggesting we forge documents? I'm suggesting we create truth from lies, Isaiah said. I can replicate handwriting. I've done it before, copying plantation ledgers for old Turner. If we had samples of Creighton's writing and letters from plantation owners he's worked with. Miss Alberta smiled. It was a dangerous smile. We have access to the main house. We have people who clean Garrison's office. Getting writing samples would be simple. This is risky, Jonas warned. If we're caught, we're already caught, Isaiah interrupted. Creighton won't leave until someone pays for those missing hunters. Either I confess, or innocent people keep getting beaten. Or we give him a different problem to worry about. The group fell silent, considering. Sam spoke first. I can get into the house. I work kitchen duty. I know the marshal's handwriting, Esther said. I've seen his reports. I can help Isaiah match the style. Grady and Marion exchanged glances. We can create a distraction, Grady offered. Something to keep patrols busy while you work. Isaiah looked at Miss Alberta. She was the eldest, the moral center. She nodded slowly. Do it, but do it right. One mistake, and we all hang. Over the next 2 hours, they planned meticulously. Sam would acquire writing samples. Esther would study the marshal's patterns. Isaiah would forge letters indicating Creighton had accepted bribes to look the other way during a rival plantation's illegal cotton sales. Marion and Grady would stage a small fire in the smokehouse. Nothing dangerous, just enough smoke to pull guards away from the main house. When the meeting ended, Isaiah returned to his cabin with a bundle of materials hidden in his shirt. Paper, ink, samples of official correspondence. He worked by candlelight, his blacksmith's precision translating to penmanship. Each letter carefully formed, each signature practiced until it matched perfectly. Outside, the plantation slept under armed guard. Somewhere, the marshal planned tomorrow's interrogations. Isaiah's hand moved across the page, creating evidence that would soon be discovered in Garrison's office. Anonymous, damning, impossible to ignore. The final signature took 3 attempts, but when Isaiah finished, even he had trouble distinguishing it from the real thing. He set down the pen and studied his work. Letters that would expose corruption. Letters that would shift attention away from missing hunters and toward a marshal whose greed had finally caught up with him. The noon sun hammered down on the plantation yard when Caleb Garrison emerged from the main house. He moved quickly, unusual for a man who normally conducted business from the shade of his porch. In his hand, papers fluttered. Isaiah was at the forge, working on a broken wagon axle. He heard Garrison's footsteps first, then the shouting. Creighton! The marshal appeared from the overseer's quarters, still adjusting his coat from an afternoon rest. His expression shifted from annoyed to alert when he saw Garrison's face. What's the meaning of this? Garrison thrust the papers forward. Isaiah kept hammering, but his attention focused entirely on the confrontation unfolding 30 yards away. Other enslaved workers slowed their tasks, watching peripherally while pretending not to notice. I don't know what you're referring to, Creighton said coolly. These letters, found in my office this morning. Letters with your signature. Letters discussing arrangements with the Thornhill plantation regarding cotton shipments and payoffs for overlooking certain irregularities. Creighton's jaw tightened. I've never written such letters. Your signature is right here. Garrison's voice rose. Your handwriting. Details about meetings you attended last month in Vicksburg. Someone is trying to discredit me. Are they? Garrison stepped closer. Because these letters mention specific dates, specific amounts, things only someone in your position would know. Isaiah's hammer struck the anvil in steady rhythm. He watched Creighton's posture shift. The marshal was rattled. Good. This is absurd, Creighton said. Obviously forged. Someone on this plantation is trying to deflect attention from the real crime. 3 missing men who came here on legitimate business. Legitimate business you arranged, Garrison countered. Business you failed to report through proper channels. Business that now has me wondering what else you've been conducting without oversight. A small crowd had gathered at a respectful distance. Patrolmen, house servants, field workers returning from the cotton rows. Everyone watching the powerful men argue. Creighton's face darkened. You're making a mistake, Garrison. I came here to help you. to solve your problem. My problem is that I have a marshal on my property who appears to be corrupt. That's a problem that can spread. That can draw attention from authorities in Jackson. Attention I don't need. These documents are false. Prove it. Garrison's voice went cold. Show me records that contradict these dates. Show me evidence that you weren't meeting with Thornhill's people. Show me anything that makes me believe you over what's written here in your own hand. Creighton said nothing. He couldn't. The forgeries were too good, too detailed, too carefully constructed to easily disprove. I want you off my property, Garrison said. Today, now. Take your men and leave. You'll regret this, perhaps, but I'll regret having a corrupt marshal in my employ even more. Garrison folded the papers. You're dismissed, Creighton. Don't return. The marshal stood frozen, rage and humiliation warring across his features. Then he turned sharply and strode toward the overseer's quarters to gather his belongings. Isaiah continued working, but something had shifted in the air. He could feel it. A loosening of tension. A collective exhale from people who'd been holding their breath for days. By late afternoon, Creighton and his men had departed. The patrol presence dropped immediately. Guards who'd been watching every movement now returned to normal duties. The brutal interrogations ceased. Garrison retreated to his office, brooding and suspicious, but focused now on other concerns. The missing hunters became yesterday's problem, eclipsed by the scandal of a corrupted marshal. That evening, Isaiah worked until full darkness before returning to his cabin. He waited. The floor shifted. Jonas emerged first, grinning wider than Isaiah had ever seen. It worked. God Almighty, it actually worked. In the tunnels, the celebration was subdued, but genuine. Miss Alberta had somehow acquired cornbread and preserves. Sam produced a hidden bottle of whiskey, carefully rationed. Esther and Marion embraced, laughing quietly. The patrol is cut in half, Grady reported. They're focused on normal duties again. Not hunting, not interrogating. Creighton's reputation is ruined, Sam added. Word spreads fast. By tomorrow, every plantation owner in the county will hear he was caught taking bribes. Miss Alberta sat beside Isaiah, her weathered hand resting briefly on his shoulder. You did this. Your hands. Your skill. Your thinking. We did this, Isaiah corrected. No, Jonas said firmly. You led this. You saw the opportunity and took it. That's what leaders do. Isaiah felt uncomfortable with the praise. He wasn't a leader. He was a blacksmith who'd gotten lucky, who'd survived when he should have died. But looking around the tunnel, seeing the faces glowing with hope and pride, something shifted inside him. Maybe leadership wasn't about wanting power. Maybe it was about seeing what needed to be done and doing it. About using whatever skills you possessed to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. What's next? Esther asked. Everyone looked at Isaiah. He thought carefully before answering. We stay careful. We don't celebrate too openly. We continue watching. Continue planning. This bought us time. But it didn't free us. But it's a start, Marion said. It's a start, Isaiah agreed. They talked for another hour, refining plans, discussing possibilities, mapping routes to freedom that still seemed impossibly distant, but somehow less impossible than before. When the meeting ended, Isaiah climbed back to his cabin. The night was cooler than previous evenings. A faint breeze drifted through the window, carrying the scent of distant rain. He lay on his sleeping mat, exhausted but calm. For the first time in days, the weight on his chest had lightened. Not disappeared. It would never disappear while he remained enslaved, but eased enough that breathing came simpler. His eyes closed. Sleep came quickly, deep and dreamless. The breeze continued through the window, stirring the cabin's stale air. Outside, the plantation rested under diminished guard. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled faintly, promising rain that might never come. Isaiah woke to silence. Not the usual morning sounds of roosters and distant work songs, but a heavy quiet that pressed against the cabin walls. He sat up slowly, muscles stiff from yesterday's labor, but his mind sharper than it had been in weeks. The air felt different, cooler. The promised rain had arrived sometime during the night, leaving the ground damp and the sky gray. Isaiah dressed and stepped outside. The quarters were subdued. People moved carefully, speaking in lowered voices. The reduced patrol presence meant fewer immediate threats, but something about the atmosphere troubled Isaiah. It felt like the pause before thunder. He walked to the smithy as sunrise struggled through thick clouds. The forge needed stoking. Work never stopped, regardless of what happened with marshals or corruption or secret tunnels. The plantation demanded productivity above all else. Isaiah built up the fire, working mechanically while his thoughts drifted to last night's celebration. The hope in people's eyes, the way they'd looked at him, like he was something more than what he'd always been. That thought unsettled him. The morning passed slowly. Isaiah repaired tools, shoed 2 horses, and straightened bent nails salvaged from broken crates. Routine work that required minimal attention. His hands knew the motions well enough that his mind could wander. Around midday, Owner Garrison appeared briefly near the smithy. He carried papers and looked agitated, muttering to himself about financial pressures and necessary adjustments. He disappeared into the overseer's quarters without acknowledging Isaiah's presence. An hour later, Isaiah noticed the overseer's door left slightly ajar. Unusual. Garrison normally kept everything locked tight. Perhaps the rain had swollen the doorframe. Isaiah approached cautiously, carrying a broken hinge as justification for being nearby. Through the gap, he could see the interior. A desk covered in ledgers and correspondence, maps of surrounding plantations, and one book left open. Pages weighted down against the breeze from a cracked window. He shouldn't look. It was dangerous. But something pulled him forward. Isaiah stepped inside quickly, crossing to the desk. The ledger was open to a page titled Asset Liquidation, 1857. Rows of names and values, livestock, equipment, and near the bottom, human beings listed like furniture. His eyes found his own name immediately. Isaiah Cole, blacksmith, age 34, 10400, marked for sale to Baton Rouge cotton operation, departure pending. The words hit like a physical blow. Isaiah steadied himself against the desk, reading the notation again to be certain he understood correctly. Garrison was selling him. Soon. Before Isaiah could cause more trouble or attract more attention or become more dangerous. The owner had decided cutting his losses meant removing the problem entirely. Voices approached outside. Isaiah retreated quickly, returning to the smithy with the broken hinge and a hollow feeling spreading through his chest. Everything from last night, the hope, the celebration, the sense of possibility, suddenly felt fragile as dry leaves. He worked through the afternoon in a daze, hammering metal without really seeing it. His mind churned through options. Running meant death. Staying meant sale and separation from everyone in the clandestine network. There had to be another path, but he couldn't see it yet. The rain started again around 3 o'clock. Light at first, then heavier. Workers retreated to sheltered areas. The fields emptied. Isaiah remained at the forge, using the weather as excuse to stay busy and alone with his thoughts. That's when he heard the shouting. It came from near the smokehouse, high-pitched and panicked. Isaiah stepped into the rain, squinting toward the commotion. Little Annie, maybe 8 years old, always talking, always curious, was being grabbed by a field hand named Marcus. She was crying, pointing at something. Marcus looked terrified. A patrolman stood nearby, soaked and alert. He'd been making rounds when he apparently overheard something. Now he was moving toward the smokehouse with purpose. Isaiah's stomach dropped. He started walking quickly in that direction, already knowing what he'd find, already understanding the catastrophe unfolding. behind the smokehouse, partially concealed by stacked firewood, the tunnel entrance sat exposed. The rain had washed away the dirt covering the trap door, and Annie, innocent and unaware, had mentioned it within earshot of someone who didn't know to keep silent. The patrolman yanked the trap door open fully, peering down into darkness. Then he ran toward the main house, shouting for the overseer. Within minutes, chaos erupted. Garrison appeared with 3 more patrolmen. They descended into the tunnels carrying torches and rifles. Screams echoed from below. Isaiah heard Miss Alberta's voice raised in defiance, then cut short. He tried moving closer, but was blocked by a guard. "Stay back, boy. This doesn't concern you." Everything concerned him. This was his fault. His leadership, his plans, his responsibility. More people emerged from the tunnel, dragged out forcibly. Jonas bleeding from a head wound. Old Turner coughing from smoke. Esther with her hands bound. They were thrown to the muddy ground and surrounded. A horse arrived at full gallop. Marshal Creighton dismounted, looking triumphant and furious. His dismissal clearly hadn't lasted long. "I told you there was more happening here," Creighton said to Garrison. "I told you this went deeper than missing hunters. You dismissed me. Now look what's been festering under your very feet." Garrison looked pale and shaken. "How did you know to return?" "Because I know how these people think. I knew they wouldn't stop. I knew there had to be organization. And now we've found it." Miss Alberta was brought out last, half-carried by 2 patrolmen. Blood ran from her mouth. She'd clearly resisted. Her eyes found Isaiah across the yard and held steady, communicating something he couldn't quite decipher. Strength, maybe, or warning. Creighton walked directly toward Isaiah. "The blacksmith," he said. "The quiet one. The one too calm, too steady, too confident. I should have known you were at the center of this." "I don't know what you're talking about," Isaiah said carefully. Creighton struck him across the face with the back of his hand. "Liar! Search his cabin. Search the smithy. Find everything." They did. They found hidden tools that could serve as weapons. They found marks on the floor where the trapdoor connected. They found evidence of exactly what Creighton wanted to find. Isaiah was seized by 4 men, his arms wrenched behind his back. Iron shackles closed around his wrists, then around his ankles. Then, worst of all, a heavy collar locked around his neck. "The cellar," Creighton ordered. "He'll wait there until we arrange his departure." They dragged Isaiah through the mud and rain toward the main house. He didn't resist. Resistance would only make things worse for the others. Miss Alberta watched from where she knelt, her expression unreadable. The cellar was dark and dank, smelling of mildew and old vegetables. They chained his collar to a thick supporting beam, giving him just enough slack to sit, but not stand. The shackles on his wrists and ankles made movement painful. Then they left him there. Hours passed. The rain continued drumming against the ceiling. Water leaked through cracks, pooling on the dirt floor. Isaiah sat in the darkness, testing the chains carefully. Solid. No weakness he could exploit. Night fell fully. The cellar door opened. Torchlight descended. Marshal Creighton appeared, staying just outside Isaiah's reach. He looked satisfied. "You thought you were clever," Creighton said. "Forging those letters, turning Garrison against me, creating your little underground rebellion." He crouched down. "But men like you always fail. Always. Because you forget your place. You forget what you are." Isaiah said nothing. "Garrison agreed to sell you at first light. There's a cotton operation in Louisiana desperate for strong backs. They don't ask questions about troublemakers. They just work them until they break." Creighton smiled. "You'll be on that wagon before sunrise, and you'll never see this place or these people again." The marshal stood and moved toward the stairs. "Your friends upstairs will be dealt with separately. The old woman especially. She'll suffer for what you convinced her to do." Then he left. The door closed. Darkness returned. Isaiah sat chained in the cellar, his neck aching from the collar's weight, his hope shattered completely. Everything he'd built, everyone he'd tried to protect, all of it collapsing around him. The rain continued falling. Water dripped steadily onto his shoulder. And Isaiah Cole, who'd survived 3 hunters and toppled a corrupt marshal, sat alone in the dark and couldn't see any way forward. Pre-dawn silence filled the cellar like water in a well. Isaiah sat against the supporting beam, his neck raw from the iron collar's weight. Hours had passed since the marshal left, maybe 4, maybe more. Time moved differently in complete darkness. His wrists ached where the shackles bit into skin. His shoulders cramped from holding the same position. Hunger gnawed at his stomach. They hadn't fed him since his capture. Thirst made his tongue stick to the roof of his mouth. But the physical pain mattered less than the weight pressing on his chest. The weight of failure, of broken promises, of Miss Alberta's blood on the marshal's hands. Isaiah tested the collar chain again, knowing it was pointless. The iron held firm. The beam wouldn't budge. He'd already tried everything his blacksmith's mind could conceive. Nothing worked. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness. Steady. Rhythmic. Like counting down the minutes until sunrise. Footsteps creaked on the floor above. Voices murmured. The plantation was waking. Soon they'd come for him. Load him onto a wagon. Ship him south, where nobody knew his name or cared about his strength. Where he'd die breaking rocks or picking cotton until his back gave out. And the people who believed in him would suffer for his choices. Isaiah closed his eyes, though it made no difference in the darkness. He thought about Josiah, the boy he'd promised better days, about Sam and Grady and Esther and Marion, who'd looked at him like he had answers, about Miss Alberta, who'd challenged him to understand the weight of leadership. He'd failed them all. The cellar door opened. Isaiah's head snapped up. Torchlight spilled down the stairs, but the footsteps descending were light, hesitant, not the heavy boots of guards. A figure appeared at the bottom of the stairs, small, young, holding a flickering candle that cast trembling shadows on the walls. Henry. The stable boy was maybe 16, thin and pale, with terrified eyes that wouldn't meet Isaiah's directly. He worked with the horses and mules, kept his head down, spoke to almost nobody. Isaiah had seen him around, but never exchanged more than a few words. Now Henry stood frozen at the base of the stairs, looking like he might bolt at any second. "You shouldn't be here," Isaiah said quietly. Henry flinched at the sound but didn't run. His hands shook, making the candlelight dance. I know I shouldn't, but I can't." His voice cracked. "I can't just let them do this." "Do what?" "Ship you south. Beat Miss Alberta. Whip the others. I heard what the marshal said he's going to do. I heard him laughing about it." Henry's voice rose with distress. "It ain't right. None of this is right." Isaiah studied the boy carefully. "Henry, if they catch you down here, they'll assume you're helping me. You understand what that means?" "I know." Henry stepped closer, still shaking. "But I've been watching what they do for years. Watching and doing nothing. Just watching." He swallowed hard. "My pa would have done something. Before he died, he told me a man's worth ain't in what he owns. It's in what he does when nobody's looking." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. Metal gleamed in the candlelight. A horseshoe nail, bent at an angle, worn smooth on one edge from years of use. Henry held it out toward Isaiah with a trembling hand. "You're a blacksmith. You know metal. Maybe you can do something with this." Isaiah stared at the nail. Such a small thing, but in the right hands, with the right knowledge, small things could open locked doors. He took it carefully, feeling the weight and shape. "Why are you doing this?" "Because someone has to." Henry's voice steadied slightly. "And because you're the only one who's ever stood up to them. The only one who's ever made them afraid." Isaiah turned the nail over in his fingers, already analyzing its potential. Guards outside? 2 at the main door, but they're drinking. Marshall gave them whiskey to celebrate your capture. Henry spoke quickly now, like the words had been building up inside him. Keys are in the overseer's office, bottom drawer of the desk. But they check on you every hour, so you ain't got long. The tunnel entrance, covered with guards during the day. But right now, before sunrise, there's only one man. He's on the far side, smoking. If you're quick and quiet, you could slip past. Isaiah met the boy's eyes. If I use this, they'll know someone helped me. I know. They'll hurt you. Maybe. Henry's jaw set with unexpected determination. But I'd rather get hurt for doing something than stay safe doing nothing. That ain't really safety anyway. That's just slow dying. The boy turned toward the stairs, then stopped. I should have done something years ago. Should have spoken up when they beat that woman for dropping laundry. Should have helped when they sold that family apart. Should have... His voice broke. Should have been braver. You're being brave now, Isaiah said. Henry looked back, eyes wet. Just get out. Get everyone out. Make them pay for what they done. Then he climbed the stairs quickly, taking the light with him. Darkness returned. But now Isaiah held the nail. He worked by touch alone, feeling for the keyhole on his wrist shackles. His blacksmith's hands knew metal intimately, knew how locks functioned, how tumblers aligned, how pressure applied correctly could shift mechanisms designed to resist. The nail slid into the keyhole. Isaiah angled it carefully, feeling for resistance. There, a pin catching. He applied gentle pressure, twisted slightly, felt something give. The first shackle clicked open. His right hand came free. Isaiah flexed his fingers, working, feeling back into them, then reached for the second shackle. This one opened faster. He understood the mechanism now. Both hands free. Next came the collar. Heavier, more complex, but the principle remained the same. Isaiah worked the nail into the lock at his throat, patient despite his racing heart. This one had 3 pins instead of 2. Took longer. Required steadier hands. The collar opened with a soft click that sounded impossibly loud in the silence. Isaiah lifted the iron from his neck, setting it down gently to avoid noise. His throat felt strange without the weight. Lighter, almost floating. The ankle shackles came last. Both opened within minutes. Isaiah stood slowly, testing his balance. His legs were stiff from hours of sitting. His head spun briefly from hunger and dehydration. But he was free of the chains. Voices murmured outside the cellar. Guards talking quietly, waiting for sunrise. Isaiah moved to the far wall, running his hands over the wooden boards. Henry had said there were guards at the entrance, but the boy hadn't mentioned anything about the cellar itself. Maybe he didn't know about the structural weakness Isaiah had noticed earlier. A loose board near the foundation where water damage had rotted the wood. Isaiah found it by touch, pushed gently. The board flexed. He worked his fingers into the gap and pulled carefully. The wood came free with barely a sound. The opening was narrow but passable. Cold air flowed through from outside. Dawn hadn't broken yet, but it was close. Isaiah squeezed through the gap, emerging into the space beneath the house's foundation. Dirt and darkness. He crawled forward on his belly, moving toward the far side, away from where the guards stood watch. He emerged near the smokehouse just as the eastern sky began turning gray. The plantation was still mostly quiet. A few early workers moved toward the fields. Smoke rose from the kitchen building. Isaiah stayed low, moving between shadows. His body remembered how to do this, how to appear invisible, how to walk without drawing eyes. Skills learned over decades of surviving. The tunnel entrance behind the smokehouse had 2 guards nearby, just as Henry said. But dawn shift change was beginning. Voices called from the quarters. Movement distracted attention. Isaiah slipped past while one guard turned to answer a question. dropping into the tunnel entrance and descending quickly into darkness. The tunnels smelled of damp earth and old smoke. Isaiah moved through them by memory, hands trailing along walls, feet finding the familiar path. Voices ahead. Whispered. Frightened. Isaiah rounded a corner and found them huddled in a small chamber lit by a single candle. Sam, Grady, and Marion. Their faces were drawn with exhaustion and fear. They'd clearly been hiding since the collapse. All three gasped when they saw him. "Isaiah!" Marion's voice came out as a squeak. "But they said, we thought." "I got out," Isaiah said simply. Sam stood quickly, eyes wide. "How?" "The marshal said you were chained, said you'd be gone by sunrise." "Someone helped me." Isaiah looked at each of them in turn. "Where are the others?" "Scattered," Grady said. "Some got caught. Some ran deeper into the tunnels. We don't know who's where." Isaiah's jaw tightened. "Miss Alberta?" "Still in the overseer's quarters. They're keeping her separate." Marion's voice shook. "Marshall wants to make an example of her." The rage that had been building in Isaiah's chest since his capture crystallized into something cold and sharp. He'd spent hours in darkness feeling helpless, feeling broken. He wasn't broken anymore. Isaiah looked at the three young faces watching him with desperate hope. "Tonight," he said quietly, "we take everyone out of here." Isaiah moved through the tunnels with purpose, his footsteps steady, despite the exhaustion pulling at his bones. Sam, Grady, and Marion followed close behind, their earlier shock giving way to cautious hope. The candle Marion carried threw long shadows against the earthen walls. "Where are we going?" Sam whispered. "To find the others," Isaiah said. "Everyone who's still down here." They wound through passages Isaiah had memorized during his brief time with the network. The tunnels branched in multiple directions, some leading to other buildings, some to dead ends where supplies were cached. Isaiah stopped at each junction, listening for sounds of movement. At the third branch, he heard voices, frightened murmuring. He moved toward the sound and found them huddled in a widened chamber that had once served as a meeting space. 12 people. Maybe more in the shadows. Esther sat with her arms around two small children. Jonas Reed leaned against the wall, his face bruised from interrogation. Old Turner held a crude torch made from twisted rags. Others Isaiah recognized but didn't know by name. Field workers, house servants, a woman who helped in the kitchen. All of them looked up when Isaiah entered. Several gasped. "They said you were taken," Esther breathed. "I was." Isaiah stepped into the center of the chamber. "I got out." "How?" Jonas pushed away from the wall. "Doesn't matter right now." Isaiah looked around at the gathered faces. "What matters is getting everyone else out." "Tonight!" Silence fell. The kind of silence that came from people who'd stopped believing in possibilities. "They got Miss Alberta," someone said from the darkness. "They'll be watching everything now." "I know." Isaiah's voice remained steady. "That's why we move fast, and we move smart." Old Turner stepped forward, torch held high. "You got a plan?" Isaiah nodded. "We create a diversion, something big enough to pull the patrols away from the quarters and the tunnel exits. While they're distracted, we move everyone through the tunnels to the swamp edge. From there, we use the waterways like we discussed before." "What kind of diversion?" Grady asked. "Fire." Isaiah met Old Turner's eyes. "Controlled fire in the far cotton fields. Not the storage barns. We're not trying to destroy everything. Just create enough smoke and flame to pull attention away." Marion's eyes widened. "That'll bring every patrolman running." "Exactly." Isaiah began sketching in the dirt with his finger. "The fields are northeast. The tunnel exits are southwest. While they're fighting the fire, we're already gone." Sam leaned closer to study the crude map. "What about the guards they'll leave behind?" "I handle them." The certainty in Isaiah's voice made several people shift uncomfortably. They'd all heard whispers about what happened to the bounty hunters, about the way 3 armed men had simply vanished. "How do we time it?" Jonas asked. "Fire goes up too early or too late," The whole thing falls apart. Isaiah reached into his pocket and pulled out something he'd taken from the overseer's office during his escape. A small brass pocket watch, still ticking. We synchronize. Sam and Marion, you take this. When the minute hand reaches the top of the hour, you light the fire. That gives us exactly enough time to get everyone positioned. Marion took the watch with trembling hands, studying its face in the torchlight. Grady, Isaiah continued, you know these tunnels better than most. You'll guide the families. Keep them quiet. Keep them moving. No matter what you hear above ground, you keep moving. Grady nodded, his young face set with determination. Miss Alberta's being held in the overseer's quarters. Isaiah's jaw tightened. We get her out first, before anything else happens. Jonas, Turner, you're both strong enough to carry her if she can't walk. You come with me. What about weapons? Someone asked. Isaiah stood. I'll handle weapons. Rest of you focus on moving fast and staying quiet. Children need to be carried if they're too small to run. Anyone who can't move quickly gets help. Nobody gets left behind. Esther spoke up. What happens when we reach the swamp? There's boats hidden in the cypress stands. Reed canoes we cached months ago. We split into small groups and take different routes through the waterways. Harder to track that way. And if they come after us? Isaiah's expression hardened. Then they deal with me. The group began preparing. Those with knowledge of the tunnel routes whispered directions to others. Parents gathered their children close. Old Turner distributed what few supplies remained cached in the chamber. Dried meat, water skins, a few blankets. Isaiah pulled Sam and Marion aside. The fire needs to be big enough to be seen from the main house, but it can't spread uncontrolled. You understand? We know how to manage fire, Sam said quietly. Watch the field burns every season. Set it on the northeast corner where the wind blows away from the quarters. Give yourselves enough time to get back to the tunnel entrance before the patrols arrive. Marion clutched the pocket watch. What if something goes wrong? If the fire doesn't light, you abort and run. If patrols spot you before you're clear, you scatter and hide. Don't try to be heroes. Isaiah met both their eyes. Your job is to create the diversion and survive. That's all. They nodded, faces pale but resolute. Isaiah moved through the group, checking on preparations. He found Jonas and old Turner near the tunnel entrance that led toward the overseer's quarters. She might be hurt bad, Turner said quietly. Might not be able to move quiet. Then we move her anyway. Isaiah's voice left no room for argument. She's been leading this network longer than any of us. We don't leave her behind. The group assembled near the main tunnel junction. Isaiah checked the watch. 15 minutes until the top of the hour. 15 minutes until everything changed. He looked at the faces around him. Fear showed in every expression. But something else showed too. Something that looked almost like hope. When we move together, Isaiah said. Trust the plan. Trust each other. And remember, they've had power over us because we let them keep it. Tonight, we take it back. Sam and Marion slipped away through the northeast passage, the watch gleaming in Marion's palm. The rest of the group began moving toward their positions, some heading for family cabins to gather loved ones, others preparing to guide escapees through the designated routes. Isaiah, Jonas, and Turner moved through a narrow passage that emerged behind the smokehouse. Above them, voices drifted through the darkness, patrols making their rounds. Unaware that beneath their feet, everything was shifting. They waited in shadow, counting heartbeats. Isaiah had forged a heavy prying bar earlier that day before his capture. It lay hidden beneath a pile of scrap iron. He retrieved it now, testing its weight. The minutes crawled past. Then, in the distance, an orange glow began to spread across the northeast sky. Flames climbed high into the darkness, pushing back the night. Shouts erupted from the main house. Bells clanged. Patrolmen ran toward the fields, voices raised in alarm. Within seconds, The careful order of the plantation dissolved into chaos. Isaiah moved. The overseer's quarters stood separate from the main house. 2 guards had been posted outside. They turned toward the fire, distracted, trying to understand what was happening. Isaiah emerged from shadow with the prying bar gripped in both hands. The first guard never saw him coming. The bar caught him across the temple and he dropped without a sound. The second guard spun, reaching for his pistol. Isaiah was already moving, closing the distance before the weapon cleared its holster. He drove his shoulder into the man's chest, slamming him against the wall hard enough to crack wood. The guard's breath left him in a whoosh. Isaiah's hand closed around his throat and squeezed until consciousness fled. Both men lay still on the ground. Jonas and Turner hurried forward. Isaiah pried open the door with the bar, splitting the lock. Inside, they found Miss Alberta tied to a chair in the center of a small room. Her face was swollen from beating. Blood crusted her mouth. But her eyes were clear and sharp when they fell on Isaiah. "Took you long enough," she whispered. Jonas and Turner cut her bonds while Isaiah kept watch at the door. The fire was spreading now, growing larger than they'd intended. Flames leaped from row to row of cotton. Smoke billowed black against the stars. They lifted Miss Alberta between them, moving as gently as possible despite the urgency. She bit back sounds of pain as they carried her toward the tunnel entrance. Underground again, they found Grady waiting with the first group of families. 20 people, maybe more, including children carried in their parents' arms. "Everyone's coming," Grady reported. "Esther's bringing the last group from the quarters." They moved through the tunnels in a long line, following the route Isaiah had mapped. The sounds of chaos filtered down from above. Shouts, running feet, the crackle of fire. But down here in the earth, they moved in focused silence. The tunnel sloped upward as they approached the swamp exit. Isaiah could smell the change in the air. Thick vegetation, standing water, the rich scent of decay that meant life and growth. They emerged into the night air beneath a canopy of cypress trees. 43 people in total, Isaiah counted quickly. Men, women, children. The entire clandestine network, and their families. Sam and Marion appeared from a different tunnel exit, breathing hard but unharmed. "Fire's spreading," Sam gasped. "Bigger than we planned." "Doesn't matter now." Isaiah guided them toward where the reed canoes lay hidden. "We keep moving." They were loading the boats when torches flared in the distance, voices carried across the water. Not the confused shouts of men fighting fire, but the organized calls of a manhunt. Marshal Silas Crichton's voice cut through the darkness, sharp and clear with rage. "Into the swamp!" "They're in the swamp!" The torches grew brighter, moving fast. A squad of patrolmen charged toward the water's edge, the marshal at their lead. The boats scattered into different channels as torches blazed behind them. Isaiah took the rear canoe with Jonas and Turner, Miss Alberta wrapped in blankets between them. The others disappeared into the darkness ahead, following routes they'd memorized in tunnel meeting. Marshal Creighton's voice echoed across the water. "Don't let them reach the deep swamp! Move faster!" But the patrolmen didn't know this terrain. They crashed through brush, their torches revealing position more than illuminating path. Isaiah listened to them struggle, marking their locations by sound alone. He guided his canoe into a narrow channel, overgrown with moss-draped branches. Behind him, he heard a patrolman curse as he sank waist-deep into hidden bog. Another shouted in pain, probably twisted his ankle in the root-tangled muck. The swamp was fighting for them. This land knew resistance. Dawn came slowly, painting the mist gray-blue. Isaiah pulled the canoe onto a raised patch of solid ground where ancient cypress trees created a small island. He helped Miss Alberta into Turner's arms. "Keep heading north," Isaiah said quietly. "Follow the star routes we practiced. Stay in the channels. Don't stop until you reach the river crossing." "Where are you going?" Turner asked, though his expression said he already knew. "Finishing this." Isaiah moved back through the swamp on foot, picking his way across fallen logs and patches of firm earth. He worked quickly, setting traps using what the land provided. A trip-vine here stretched low across a likely path. A false path there, leading straight into deep mud. He loosened dead branches overhead so they'd fall with the slightest disturbance. The marshal's voice grew closer. "Spread out! They can't have gone far." Isaiah climbed a broad cypress and waited. Below, 3 patrolmen pushed through the undergrowth. They looked exhausted, clothes torn, faces scratched from branches. One stepped directly onto Isaiah's trip vine. He fell forward hard, and the impact triggered the loosened branches overhead. They crashed down with enough force to pin him in the mud. The other 2 paused, suddenly uncertain. This swamp had turned hostile in ways they didn't understand. Isaiah dropped from the tree behind them. Both men spun, reaching for weapons. Isaiah was faster. He kicked the first man's legs out from under him and drove an elbow into the second man's throat before either pistol cleared its holster. They went down, gasping. Isaiah took their weapons, threw them into deep water, and kept moving. He found the marshal 20 yards ahead, standing alone on a patch of raised ground. Creighton had sent his remaining men in different directions. Now he stood isolated, torch in one hand, pistol in the other. Their eyes met across the misty clearing. "Isaiah Cole," Creighton said. His voice carried that familiar authority, the tone of a man accustomed to being obeyed. "You've made a mistake. You think crossing a river changes anything? You think freedom exists for men like you?" Isaiah stepped into the clearing. "Put down the pistol." "Or what?" Creighton raised the weapon. "You'll kill me like you killed those bounty hunters? Like you've been killing men all week? Put it down." "Why should I?" The marshal's finger tightened on the trigger. "Give me one reason I shouldn't end you right here." Isaiah took another step forward. "Because you already know you're beaten. You've been beaten since the moment you walked onto that plantation thinking you could break us." Creighton fired. The shot went wide. Rushed. Angry. Imprecise. Isaiah had already moved, closing the distance before the marshal could adjust his aim. He slammed into Creighton with his full weight, driving them both into the mud. The fight that followed had nothing graceful about it. They rolled through the muck, each struggling for advantage. Creighton fought with desperate fury. He'd built his entire reputation on being the man who crushed resistance, who made enslaved people fear his very name. Isaiah fought with something deeper. Every blow carried years of suppressed rage. Every movement channeled the strength he'd built hammering iron in the smithy. Every breath reminded him of the people depending on him to survive this. Creighton managed to get his hands around Isaiah's throat. They squeezed with surprising strength. Black spots danced in Isaiah's vision. His lungs burned. But Isaiah had forged himself in fire. He'd survived everything this world threw at him. He would survive this too. He drove his knee upward into Creighton's ribs. Once, twice. The grip on his throat loosened. Isaiah twisted, reversing their positions. Now he was on top, pinning the marshal in the mud. He grabbed Creighton's wrist and slammed it against a cypress root until the bones cracked. The marshal screamed. His other hand clawed at Isaiah's face, desperate and wild. Isaiah caught that wrist too. He forced both of Creighton's arms down into the mud and leaned his full weight onto them. The marshal thrashed beneath him, but exhaustion and injury had stolen his strength. "This is what you never understood," Isaiah said quietly, his voice hoarse from the choking. "Power isn't just what you take from people. It's what they take back." He pressed harder. Creighton's struggles grew weaker. The marshal's face had gone pale beneath the mud. His breathing came in ragged gasps. Isaiah leaned close. "You're going to live. You're going to crawl back to your people and tell them exactly what happened here. Tell them Isaiah Cole crossed that river. Tell them we all did. Tell them you couldn't stop us. He released Creighton's arms and stood. The marshal lay gasping in the mud, unable to move. Isaiah took the man's remaining weapons and disappeared into the swamp mist. The river came into view an hour later. Gray water stretched wide under the dawn sky. On the far bank, Isaiah saw the boats, long skiffs piloted by free black boatmen who'd been waiting through the night. The clandestine network's final insurance. His group was already loading into the vessels. Miss Alberta sat wrapped in blankets, her face turned toward the northern shore. Children huddled against their parents. Men and women who'd spent their entire lives in bondage now stood on the threshold of something new. Isaiah waded into the water and climbed into the last skiff. The boatman nodded once, recognition and respect in that simple gesture, and pushed them away from Mississippi's shore. They crossed in silence as the sun rose. I hope you found that story powerful. Leave a like on the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. I have handpicked 2 stories for you that are even more powerful. Have a great day.